All right, let's jump right into Mark chapter 2. This is a chapter that is just packed with action and, honestly, a lot of conflict. We're going to see a series of 4 stories that really build on each other, and with each encounter, the tension gets a little higher. And we learn something even more radical about who Jesus claims to be.
So the chapter kicks off with one of the most famous and, frankly, incredible healing stories in the entire Bible. But as we're going to see, the real miracle, the moment that causes a total uproar, has almost nothing to do with healing paralysis.
So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through these 4 key encounters. You'll see how Jesus' claims get bolder and bolder, and how the conflict with the religious leaders of the day just gets more and more intense.
Our first story just drops us right into the middle of the action. Jesus is back in a town called Capernaum, and he's teaching inside a house that is so jam-packed with people, you literally could not get in or out the front door. The place is just overflowing. And this is where we see this incredible display of what you might call crazy faith. These 4 friends show up, and they are so determined, so convinced that Jesus can change their friend's life, that they're willing to literally tear a house apart to get to him. I mean, can you imagine? They haul their friend up onto the roof, start digging through the clay and thatch, and just lower him right down in front of Jesus. The dust and debris falling, everything just stops. It's an amazing moment. Now, this is the twist in the story. Everybody in that room, including the man's friends, they're all expecting a physical healing. But Jesus looks right past the obvious physical problem and goes straight for what he sees as the man's deepest, most profound need. He doesn't fix the legs first, he deals with the man's soul. And you can almost hear the gears turning in the heads of the religious experts in the room. This was their silent, internal reaction. You see, in their world, Jesus had just crossed a sacred line. Forgiving sins? That was God's job, and God's job alone. So for them, this wasn't just a bold claim. It was blasphemy, plain and simple. So Jesus, knowing exactly what they're all thinking, he lays down a challenge. He basically says, hey, what's easier to say? Your sins are forgiven, which is something you can't see or prove, or get up and walk, which you absolutely can see. He's about to connect his invisible authority to a very, very visible demonstration of power. And that's the kicker. The physical healing wasn't the main event. It was the proof for the main event. By doing the thing they could all see with their own eyes, he proved he had the authority to do the thing they couldn't see. The man walking home was the evidence that his sins were in fact forgiven. So the tension is already pretty high, and it just keeps on building from here. Now the conflict moves from this quiet theological debate inside a house to a very public social scandal right after Jesus calls a new disciple named Levi. Now, to really get why this next scene is such a shocker, you have to understand who tax collectors were back then. This guy, Levi, who you might know as Matthew, was basically working for the enemy, the Roman Empire. He and his friends were seen as traitors who got rich by taking advantage of their own people. To the religious establishment, they were the definition of sinners. So when the Pharisees see Jesus at a party at Levi's house, eating and hanging out with a whole crowd of these sinners, they are just appalled. And Jesus hits them with this powerful statement that really defines his whole mission. He's like a spiritual doctor, and a doctor goes where the sickness is. And that really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? It just completely shatters the idea that faith is only for people who have it all together. Jesus is saying, no, I'm here for the people who know they're broken, for those who admit they need a doctor for their soul. Okay, so the conflict shifts again. This time it's about ideology. The religious leaders are basically asking why Jesus and his followers don't play by their rules, by their traditions. And Jesus uses these 2 really simple, everyday metaphors to explain that what he's bringing is something so new, it can't be contained by the old ways. So it all starts with a question about fasting. You see, the disciples of John the Baptist and the Pharisees, they fasted regularly. It was a big part of their spiritual practice. The people noticed Jesus' crew, well, they aren't doing it, and they want to know why. And Jesus' first answer is just stunning. He calls himself the bridegroom. Now, anyone who knew their scriptures would have known that's a title used for God or the Messiah in the Old Testament. He's basically saying, the party's here. This is a time for celebration, not for the kind of mourning that goes with fasting. This illustration captures his point perfectly. See, back then, they stored wine in leather bags or wineskins, and new wine, as it fermented, would expand.
If you put that expanding new wine into an old, brittle wineskin that had no stretch left, it would burst. Jesus is saying, what I'm bringing, this new life, this new kingdom, is like new wine. You can't just pour it into the old, rigid structures of your traditions. It'll break them. It needs something entirely new.
All right, now we get to the climax of the chapter. This is where the conflict really boils over, because Jesus is about to challenge one of the absolute pillars of Jewish religious life, the Sabbath.
The whole thing is sparked by something that seems pretty minor. Jesus and his disciples are walking through a grain field on the Sabbath, and the disciples are hungry, so they pluck some heads of grain to eat. But to the Pharisees, with all their extra man-made rules, this counted as harvesting, and that was work, which was strictly forbidden on the Sabbath. And Jesus just completely flips their entire perspective on its head. He says they've got it all backwards. God didn't create people to be slaves to a rule book. He created rules, like the Sabbath, as a gift to bless and refresh people. But then he takes it one massive step further. He doesn't just offer a new interpretation of the law, he claims to have authority over the law. He's basically saying, I'm the one who gets to say what this day is all about because I am its Lord. I mean, that is an astonishing claim, one that belongs to God alone. So you can see how it all fits together, right? These 4 stories aren't just random. They're a step-by-step reveal. Each claim over sin, over society, over tradition, and finally over God's own law gets more and more direct, more and more challenging. Mark is painting a very clear picture of who Jesus is. And that leaves us right here with his final question. The whole chapter is pushing its readers to answer, who is this man? If these were the claims he made back then, it forces us to ask ourselves, what does it really mean to recognize that same authority in our own lives over every single area right here and now?